If each woman has 20 plus other relatives and extended family, that is a minimum of 2,080 people with a murdered family member.
Hello and welcome to this vlog for the Survivor Diaries. The title of this vlog is going to be Domestic Abuse and Survivor Voices, and in particular the importance of survivor voices being heard. There will be some disclaimers, as I usually do, so I'm disclaiming first of all that I'm a solicitor in England and Wales, and so if you live outside of England and Wales, any law that I refer to will not apply to you. Secondly, I'm always speaking in very general terms, and you should always seek specific advice about your own unique circumstances. And there's lots of places where you can get free advice. A lot of solicitors will offer free initial consultations. The Citizens Advice Bureau, Rights of Women, I've flagged all of these up before. We'll put some links to these below. Another link that we're going to put below is a link to the conference itself. It is a lengthy conference. It was a full day conference in Newport in Wales on the 13th of September of this year. I attended, and I'm still processing that conference. I'm still processing how I feel. Things seem to be changing and expanding with me. I realise that the Survivor Diaries channel, obviously we're dealing with domestic abuse and how it continues with the child arrangements in particular, and that's my area of law and something that I see happening. I've made my position about this very clear. It does continue unless the behaviour is being addressed by the perpetrator. There is a mechanism in law which enables the court to usually properly determine domestic abuse and make decisions, make orders that can protect people from domestic abuse. So that's what the Survivor Diaries are normally about. What that's part of, though, is a bigger fight that I am now feeling part of, along with other people working in different areas of domestic abuse. So I keep referring to Luke and Ryan Hart working very much on the coercive control that can lead up to very violent behaviours, intimate partner homicide after a series of steps. Okay, so this is something else, all information that's in the link to this video below. And why am I putting this link? Because everybody should see it. Everybody should see and hear the voices of the survivors of that conference. And they want to be heard. I want to be heard on the issue of domestic abuse. They want to be heard about domestic abuse because domestic abuse affects everybody. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. Domestic abuse is a problem of society, and it's going to take all of society standing up to it. Okay, I'm going to clarify both of those things shortly. However, this is showing a difference in the normal vlogs and the normal episodes. So they're normally about the child arrangements programme and dealing with child arrangements issues as it continues through court proceedings, just through the arrangements for the children, and how that co-parenting relationship can be subject to abuse. And this is part of a bigger problem, isn't it? It's part of a bigger problem, which is domestic abuse exists in society. So I want to talk about, just briefly, and be clear about what domestic abuse is. Domestic abuse is a patriarchal issue. So it's a gender-based issue. It exists because of patriarchal society, religion, culture, patriarchal thinking that somehow men are superior to women, or that somehow men have control or power over women. They are superior in some respect. And it's about male control of female. And that's why it's a gender-based issue. Okay, and yes, of course, it happens the other way around, and I always disclaim this. It does happen. You know, violence can be from female to male, but we're talking about the biggest global killer of women worldwide. We're talking about something that kills more women of a certain age group, sort of younger to mid age group of women, than cancer. We're talking about something that is, I think it's 1 in 4 women allegedly experience domestic abuse, and some kind of control, some kind of behaviour. And it's this patriarchal society, and it hangs on even in UK society, both men and women buy into it, and I probably bought into it as I was younger, not understanding what it was. But I grew up in the 70s. It was a different time. Go back 100 years, different time again. I think we're thinking sort of Downton Abbey times, and women couldn't own land, and go back a bit further, and you can see that men have assumed control of women, and it's that where the problem is. That's the kind of domestic abuse that I'm talking about in this episode. So it's especially important that I do disclaim that I do know that it can happen in other forms, but the majority of this episode is going to be talking about male violence against women and girls, and it's talking about it as a gender issue, because it is a gender issue. Part of the conference was encouraging people to speak about their experiences of domestic abuse, and in doing so to raise awareness about domestic abuse and try to stop people thinking that it's this other person's problem, or it doesn't affect us, it doesn't happen to us. I want all people to be able to watch this video, whether they have experienced domestic abuse directly, indirectly, or not experienced it at all. And I want all people to be able to watch this video and say, no, domestic abuse, I understand what it is, and I do not agree that it is right. And that's how we're going to squeeze it out of society. And if you are a man watching this video, and you are so far through this video talking about domestic abuse as a male violence against women, and if you're so far with me, then the chances are you're non-abusive. However, even if you felt that maybe some of your behaviours were abusive, within this vlog I intend to address that too. So sticking to the point that I was originally making, sometimes this is all a bit difficult to talk about in society, and I'm going to do a whole episode about how difficult it is for society to talk about domestic abuse, because as identified through the Stand Up to Domestic Abuse conference, more people need to talk about domestic abuse. It's going to take society to eradicate the problem of domestic abuse. It may be that it's difficult because a male may recognise those behaviours in themselves, a female may recognise them in their intimate partner, and that may make it difficult. And it's a very difficult time when you're in that kind of relationship to understand if it is abuse at all, because the thing about domestic abuse that is so difficult to deal with is that it's the person you're in a relationship with. It's the place where you're supposed to be safe and protected, and to say that that is a confusing time from personal experience is an absolute understatement. So carrying on, domestic abuse, even though we don't talk about it, or people find it difficult to talk about, it's something that affects all of society, as I'm going to go on to in a second. It affects all of society. It affects you, I can guarantee, whoever you are, it affects you. And it's because it's a problem of society. It's going to take all of society to deal with it. I think I'm labouring that point, but it's an important point to labour. If you still think about whether or not it doesn't affect you, then you would need to ask yourself whether or not can you answer yes to any of these questions. Are you female? Do you have a female friend? Do you have a sister? Do you have a daughter? Do you have a mother? Then it affects you. This is gender-based violence against women and girls. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm not going to disclaim anymore. It affects you. And I'm going to actually borrow directly from one of the speakers at the conference to illustrate this point and how many people are affected by domestic abuse. And it's not just the people that you think. So you may be watching this video thinking, oh, domestic abuse, it doesn't affect me. I'm not in that kind of relationship. Well, the first speaker that I'm going to talk about, it wasn't her relationship. It was the relationship of her mother and her stepfather. And she is also a survivor of domestic abuse, and I need you to see that who we think of as survivors might not be the person in the intimate partner relationship. It may be somebody associated with the intimate partner relationship, such as children, who are also victims of domestic abuse. And Georgia Hooper, who spoke at the conference, and I didn't actually get to speak to her at the conference, but I have since had a conversation with her, and she's given her permission to share this part of her story, her video, her extremely harrowing experience, which she described when we were at the conference, and you could hear the air being taken in the room. You couldn't hear a pin drop, as she told her exceptionally harrowing experience and what she has experienced very recently, and for somebody of such a young age to have the strength to be able to stand before all of those people and to share that experience, I've got so much respect for her. She will be a future campaigner. And so I'm just going to hopefully pull a clip now to Georgia's sort of estimations of the minimum amount of people that are affected by one intimate partner homicide.
My mum's name was one of the 104 names, from what I counted, and minus the deaths from terrorism, read out by MP Jess Phillips in Parliament on International Women's Day 2018. And I wanted to get a rough approximation of the people affected by those deaths from that year collectively. So if we assume that each woman has a child, 104 children are left without a mother. If each woman had both parents alive, that's 208 parents having to bury their child. If each woman has 20 plus other relatives and extended family, that is a minimum of 2,080 people with a murdered family member. If each woman has a minimum of 50 friends and colleagues, that's 5,200 people losing a friend. Now that is a grand total of 7,592 people, and that is only a minimum. It misses out hundreds of people, neighbours, clients, the local area, the family, friends and colleagues affected by the change in the people left behind. The ripple effect does not stop.
It's such a privilege to have spoken to Georgia, and she is without doubt a future campaigner of spreading information, increasing awareness in society of different coercive controlling behaviours, the patterns in intimate partner homicide, and about domestic abuse that we need people to be aware of. I understand that Georgia she's even done research about her own school where she attends, and found out that the majority of the upper secondary level of her school, they do want this information, they do want this education, and that's so brilliant. But she will be going around delivering information to upper secondary level schools, and she will be talking about the problem of domestic abuse. And then all of the people that she speaks to will then talk about domestic abuse, and they will then have to decide if they are an abusive person or a non-abusive person, and if they're going to stand up to domestic abuse and abusive behaviours. This is absolutely brilliant. Her school must be so proud of her. The conference overall, all of the speakers were amazing, absolutely amazing. So I can't stop urging you enough to watch the video. Obviously the conference itself was organised by Rachel Williams, a survivor herself and now a campaigner to eradicate the problem of domestic abuse. And as she correctly identifies, it's about talking about it, about increasing awareness. Rachel's experience is set out in her book, which is The Devil at Home. I recommend reading, even if you think domestic abuse doesn't affect you, read these real life experiences of other people, because we need you to understand the many different forms that domestic abuse can take. And Luke and Ryan Hart, their book, Remembered Forever, the only time that they understood that it was an abusive relationship, so a violent relationship, was upon the death of their mother and their sister Charlotte. And in all of that tragedy, again, breathtaking, as a person was able to speak about such a difficult experience, such a trauma, and still use it to want to explain to other people so that we can raise this awareness about what domestic abuse is and squeeze it out of society. This is how we eradicate domestic abuse from society. And the government recognised this, just in case there was any further doubt. The government, we've talked about the domestic abuse bill in a previous episode, the government were consulting for months, years before the bill was actually placed before Parliament. And I know this because I was invited to a consultation and I spoke as a survivor and a professional, as a number, so completely unidentifiable. And we were asked questions about what we needed to see happen in society to end the problem of domestic abuse. And one of those things was to increase awareness in schools, so that signs of domestic abuse can be recognised earlier. More people talk about domestic abuse in schools, there's more support available. Training on all levels of society, not just the family justice system, as I've been saying, but all levels. So wherever you work. So if you are a taxi driver, a hairdresser, these are people who come into contact with people on a daily basis. Could you pick up the signs of domestic abuse? Could you make it okay for the person to talk about it? And if they could then talk about it, you've helped them on the first step to being able to get out of that situation. And this is how domestic abuse affects us as a society, and it needs all of societies to be able to stand up with us and help us to eradicate the problem. So the government recognised the importance. They did these consultations in the planning of the domestic abuse bill. This ties in with Georgia Hooper and her being able to speak within schools. I understand that Pat Craven, who was also at the conference, she has developed a programme for very young children, understanding the character of the dominator. And I believe that this is, you'll have to forgive me if this is wrong, but I believe that the dominator is played by a dragon or something very age appropriate for younger children to understand behaviours that we don't want in society anymore, which is about one person controlling another in any form, and in this focus, in a gender-based way. The government recognised the importance. In addition to that, you've got speakers, people who are not necessarily connected with the Stand Up to Domestic Abuse conference, as far as I know, presenting their information in the House of Commons. So MP Rosie Duffield speaking on the 2nd of October, total respect for what she said and what she was able to say about her own situation. And it's a brilliant thing that she did. She shared information, people talked about it, people were able to learn more and see more about the problem, and that's what we need to happen. And that's what will happen and continue to happen as a result of pioneering work of Rachel Williams, other speakers, Luke and Ryan Hart, all pushing for the same thing. Georgia Hooper, don't forget Georgia Hooper, all pushing for the same thing, which is the ending of domestic abuse. And that's why this vlog is focusing particularly on this aspect. Another thing that happened at the conference is that I met and spoke with the organiser of the Court Said demonstration. And if you don't know, the hashtag Court Said campaign, I'm putting up some links to that now. The Court Said campaign is arranging a demonstration which will be on the 26th of October 2019 at 12 p.m. on Parliament Square in London. And this is a peaceful protest, a peaceful demonstration where people will be carrying placards about the family justice system with the hashtag The Court Said. And I've had a question directly asked through the Survivor Diaries about this campaign, so I'm just going to cover this very briefly, along with my other disclaimer, which is that you should always take advice if you can about your own situation. A question has been asked about the Court Said. I'm just looking down at my note here. And if you are in court proceedings and you attend the demonstration, is it an automatic contempt of court? So, answering this, legally, it is not contempt of court to make a peaceful protest. Okay, so it's not automatically, no. So can you stand there and hold a placard? Of course you can. Legally, you have a right to peaceful protest. The difficulty that we have is that family proceedings are private. So the main thing here that you must understand is that you must maintain absolute privacy about your own proceedings. And I've had a conversation since the conference with Natalie, the organiser, and we've talked through some things. She's asked me to cover some things which would reassure people. So first of all, she has also been asked the question, is it automatic contempt of court? No, it isn't. However, on the placards, you should hashtag The Court Said, and you should not use the words I, we, me, myself, my children, anything identifiable to you. You can state what you need to state on the placards, but what it's important to do is to not identify you or any parties to court proceedings. One thing that is an excellent idea that Natalie was discussing is that people are intending to swap placards as well. So if they are pretty neutral in who they identify, but it's just this is what happened, then people, to my understanding, will be exchanging placards and therefore identification risks will be minimised. In terms of the Court Said campaign, of course, it is something, if you've been watching the Survivor Diaries, that I am going to be likely to be supporting. And although I can't attend myself, I do support and I do stand with those survivors in their peaceful demonstration at Parliament Square on the 26th of October. And this is because, as I keep saying through these episodes, through the channel, domestic abuse will always continue through the child arrangements unless it's been addressed by the perpetrator. And this causes further harm to the person subject to the abuse, the other parent, and the children involved in that relationship. It always continues without fail, in my opinion. And it will always continue through the children. Am I saying it always happens from man to woman? No, but I'm just saying that in the child arrangements, that's what happens. And the court has a mechanism to deal with child arrangements when there's been allegations of domestic abuse. That's the Practice Direction 12J. My personal and professional experience is that this is not implemented consistently or as robustly as it should be. And therefore I fear that these placards are going to be a sea of examples of where the practice direction has not been correctly implemented and followed when it should have been. And that's me wanting the courts to address the problem of domestic abuse. The message that I've taken from the conference, Stand Up to Domestic Abuse, is that it's a bigger problem. We need everybody to sort out an attitude, a way to deal with and eliminate domestic abuse from the society. And the way that it's going to do is by people talking about it. So other information from Natalie, they have a shop, they have other things, information that they can give you to help you with this. In terms of transport, I understand that they are also arranging private transport at a very reasonable cost. This is to and from the event, and it is private transport. So if you are travelling alone, you would be instantly, when you travel on the coach, you should be travelling with other people, other like-minded people going to the same conference, and I'm expecting that that should be a friendly experience. The exact location of the pickup points, the various pickup points around the UK, will be given to the people very shortly in advance of the actual travel to London itself, so that the pickup locations can be kept as secret as possible for obvious reasons. Taking away this massive message about the fact that domestic abuse is a problem of society, and as a society we need to stand up to domestic abuse. We need everybody to do this. And I've mentioned earlier on in this vlog about what if you're an abusive man, so this is where I'm going to come back to this as well as a full episode just dedicated to the Stand Up to Domestic Abuse conference. There will be a flowing episode about men. So I've mentioned already there'll be an episode about why it's difficult to talk about, and then an episode specifically aimed at men, abusive men and non-abusive men. And one of the most profound things of the conference, I say that, but it was all really profound for me, so I don't want to do anybody a disservice here. But one of the things that I saw was that we had male speakers talking about the problem of domestic abuse. So Mark Drakeford, the First Minister for Wales, was the first male speaker talking about the fact that it's society's problem and society needs to address it. And then we had Michael Sheen talking about how it's a problem and men need to be addressing their behaviour, checking their behaviour, and they need to be checking other men's behaviour. And this is just, of course, we need more men to stand up to domestic abuse as well with us to eradicate the problem. Luke and Ryan Hart, obviously they're male, but also just men saying, no, it's not okay. This gender-based violence against women is not okay. And I meet loads of men who think like this. And there are other men, and there are groups of men who think that violence against women and girls is intolerable. And there's a campaign, the White Ribbon campaign. We're going to put a link to that below. These are other men committed to ending patriarchal abuse, domestic abuse in society, ending violence against women and girls, and most of all, probably challenging other men who are demonstrating patriarchal and or abusive behaviour or attitudes towards women. And if men are challenging that, then this again is helping to squeeze the problem of domestic abuse out of society. And men, abusive men, have a choice here, don't they? So when they're being challenged more people are talking about domestic abuse, maybe people that they're in a relationship with are more aware, more intolerant of abusive behaviours. So they're faced with a choice, aren't they? They're faced with a junction. They can either continue to maintain that they are right and this is the way it should be and that's the end of it and it's all her and it's all lies, etc., etc. Or they can examine their own behaviour and they can see if it falls into the category of abuse. Because remember, if domestic abuse is this overhang from the patriarchal society, then maybe it's possible to do something about it, to address that behaviour. And one thing that they might do to address their behaviour, just plugging Pat Craven again. Pat Craven has started with her team, she started a 2-day course for men, which is going to be held in Lancashire, as and when enough interest for each group takes place. And it's a 2-day course. The person, if they are still in a relationship, the man, if they are still in a relationship, must attend with their partner, who is going to give feedback about their behaviour and how they are taking on board the information. To save some kind of inundation of interest, I'm going to say right now that there is no certificate at the end of this course. Okay, and that I hope will turn off a lot of the males who are looking for a certificate specifically so that they can show the court that they've sorted out domestic abuse. People who genuinely want to understand domestic abuse and genuinely want to understand if the behaviour is abusive, like the dominator, described by Pat Craven in her book Living with the Dominator, should do this course. And then one of two things will happen. They will either realise that there are changes that need to be made, and then there's further support available, domestic abuse perpetrator programmes, to help them to really work on changing that behaviour in a positive and happy way. So changing from being somebody who needs to control women, to be the king of the castle, be the big boss, to being somebody who seems to be receiving lots more love, admiration from women for being what is Pat Craven's friend. And these are all the people, all the men, that are standing up to domestic abuse with us. The White Ribbon campaign, the Michael Sheen standing up saying, no, men need to say that this is not okay to other men as well, which is just brilliant. So they become more of those men. And then there's what happens if they still reject it, they still say, no, they're misunderstood, it's all, mutual abuse, etc., they're not going to change. Well, then that's fine. What they will find is a society where awareness has been raised and people are less tolerant to this abusive behaviour, and gradually they'll just go on seeing that it's more difficult to get into that kind of relationship. They're going to live a miserable and lonely existence as domestic abuse is further talked about and recognised in society. So I hope I've covered in this vlog a lot of information that I've taken from the Stand Up to Domestic Abuse conference. There's going to be quite a lot of links underneath this, so the link to the channel itself, a lot of links for the information about the court said. I'm going to put some links to information about Georgia Hooper and the White Ribbon Group, of course. If you are affected by any of the issues in this, then please do seek help. If you are a man who has managed to get right the way through this vlog and you think that you are abusive, then please do look at the Freedom Programme for Men 2-day course, which is run by Pat Craven. So I hope that's been useful. Thank you once again, as always, for watching this vlog for the Survivor Diaries on domestic abuse and the importance of survivor voices. Thank you and bye.